Okay, this series of videos will be on this GE SuperBase, which you can see here is a model 3-5875A. This one is in extremely nice condition. Cover's already also, you can't see that, but it's in extremely good condition also. No scratching to speak of on the lens. Everything, faceplate's in really nice shape. This one the customer has had for a long time. Had worked before fine, plugged it in, turned it on, was transmitting, and it stopped. He heard something pop or click or crack or something inside, and it quit transmitting. So he has sent it in. Now when I first turned it on, it had no receive either. Everything was completely dead. The channel display, pretty much all the illumination. The only thing that was working was the clock. And it's something that if you ever work on GE SuperBases or the mobiles, they also made this. It has the exact same double circuit board chassis in mobiles, and you'll really have a lot of problems with that usually in the mobiles. But it's also frequently a problem in the base stations. All of these pass-through connectors. So you've got jumper wires. These wires go down and are soldered to the circuit board on the bottom side and plug in here. You know, this one, all the wires are on the top side. They plug into the bottom board. There's more here. So you've got a bunch of pass-through jumper connectors. The connectors, they're cold solder joints. And that's what was wrong. That's why I didn't have anything basically to start with. The channel display was so dim you could barely see it. And all I did was just wiggled the plug, and it came back to life. But I was trying to verify, the condition. But right now it's hooked up to a dummy. Let me switch over to external. So you can see it does have receive. Seems to be working fine. It's in transmit. We'll give that a try here. So you can see it's in AM mode. You just barely see a flicker, and that's just happening because it's switching over. And it is switching over. Now you can see, as I speak, it does have modulation. So if I get the mic up to my mouth here, yeah, you can see it definitely has modulation. But there is no RF power output. And if we flip over to sideband, audio, 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 there's nothing, it's dead. So we've confirmed that it has no transmit power. Now, I had told the customer that extremely likely it had a electrolytic capacitor go bad. Very common, and not just this radio. Go up here and turn off the power. But anything electronic this vintage, and sure enough, this one has had one leaking. If you look in here, grab a pointer here. If you look in, this cap right here has leaked, and it might have, no guarantee, but there's a good possibility that might have been what the pop was. It belched out all over the circuit board. And you can see all this corrosion here, here, here. So all these traces have been corroded. So it's going to get an electrolytic capacitor change. He wants this, and he wants no modifications done to this. He basically wants a good working stock radio. He had asked if there were any modifications that can be done to these that are worthwhile doing. He doesn't want channel mods or anything like that, but he wanted to know if there was anything you could do to improve it. And I told him, honestly, the reason these radios are so popular is they work so well. It's not like a lot of your modern radios, well, not a lot, pretty much all of your modern radios. It's not that they don't do good circuit designs nowadays. It's just they're cheap. They're cheaply made. And that has nothing to do with what country they're made in. I know a lot of people say, oh, Chinese junk. And I agree with that. That's where the junk comes from now. But the country that junk comes from changes from year to year or decade to decade. It just happens to be whoever will make it the cheap as you want. I mean, I see extremely high quality stuff come out of China. They can build stuff just as good as we can here in the U.S. or the Germans or the Swiss even. But you're going to pay the same price as you would pay here in this country or in Germany or in Switzerland or wherever else on the planet. So it just comes down to they're the people that are willing to make cheap shit for next to nothing basically nowadays, and that's what you get. And the big difference there is it's like I say, it's not so much the circuitry. These were a little bit better designed, but they did that because they weren't so much worried about money. They could throw extra parts at it, where nowadays they keep it a little bit more minimalist. But these radios just have, for starters, better filtering. I mean, you can see how many components. You've got 2 circuit boards. There's one here, and there's one on the top side. This basically is about as many components as you would have in a normal CB radio nowadays, in a normal, AM sideband CB radio. Well, this one has basically twice as many. Well, that cost a lot of extra money, and that's where you get a lot of your performance benefits with these older radios, not just this GE SuperBase. I tell people pretty much anything made back in the 70s or 80s, and the 80s is where stuff started to fall apart. That's where the bean counters got in, and they started basically destroying radios. I hate to say that, but that's where they came in. They got their grubby little profit margin, searching for fingers into radio design, and radios have just gone downhill ever since. Yes, modern radios have all kinds of nice, nifty, neat features, but you just don't see the quality. And it's not just how the circuits are designed, what components they use, it's the build quality. You see radios, a lot of radios nowadays, the chassis aren't built as heavy. I mean, you definitely wouldn't see. You look at this potentiometer here, this is the one that adjusts your AM carrier level. That thing is huge. That's, oh my God, nowadays a wire wound, potentiometer that high a wattage, you'd probably be looking at what, $15 to $20, if not more, for one of these things nowadays. So that's basically the problem. Like I say, these just have extremely, they're very well designed. They tried to temperature compensate even the crystals to an extent here. These are actually crystals, and so you see this little white box right here. If you go down on the underside, notice you don't see any individual crystals anywhere on the circuit board. There's a little box there, there's a little box there. That's because the crystals are inside these little boxes that are potted in a silicone potting compound, and that's to try and keep as radio changes temperature, because when you're transmitting, you see these heat sinks back here and all along the back side, just your driver and final transistor area, you're going to be generating a lot of heat. You've got resistors here generating heat, just electronic components in general generate heat. So, you don't see that in modern radios. You see that in ham radios. Ham radios have always had that, very good, trying to keep frequency stable, but that's one way they did it in these older radios, why these are a lot more stable than your, a lot of people complain about the Galaxies and Rangers, how some of them drift so horrible. They just have a crystal. It's just mounted on the circuit board. So every little whiff of heat that might come over across it heats it up, it drifts off frequency, high or low a little bit. This helps to prevent that, because they're mounted in a solid block of silicone. It's not that it's insulating it, it's that it helps keep it at a constant temperature. But it's little things like that that help to, make these radios a lot better than your modern radios. And they had, a lot of extra little features in these. This has the speech processor, which you can turn on and off right here. Okay, has a speech compressor. That's what this circuit board is right here. But like I say, these are popular because they were very well built. This chassis was used in, like I say, a few other radios used in mobile application. Also, Midland had this, let's see here, what the heck is that? The 78-999, which was Midland's version, basically, of this radio. Same chassis, but extremely well built and good working radios. But that's why these are popular. But like I say, I thought I'd go just do, quick overview of, what was wrong with the radio without hooking up any test equipment, what I've found. And like I say, that's very common. Capacitors leaking, going bad. And you'll see a lot of my videos, and that's a lot of my work. It's a lot of what I do, changing caps. So the downfall of this chassis is by design. Normally, base stations or mobiles, you take the covers off, stand the radio up on its side, and you can just get in from one side with a desoldering iron and pull the component from the other side. You're not that fortunate with this style, because you can see the actual solder side of the circuit board. Now these are dual-sided, that's another thing, and that's why these has corroded traces here, but the majority of your traces, they're on the underside of this board. And the same thing here. So you have to take all the screws out, dismount this top board, and swing it up and out of the way. And you can't remove it because it does have all these wires are attached to it. And you disconnect all the jumpers, take the screws out, pull this up. Let me set this back down. Then you can swing this board up, and then there's you can see that little green down in there. There's actually a shield plate in between the top and bottom circuit boards, and then it's connected by a ground wire back here. But like I say, you have to lift all this up out of the way. I'll desolder that wire so I can get that plate out of the way. But it just makes it more difficult to work on. You know, so all those caps will be changed. You know, down on the power supply, they'll be changed. There are a few that are tricky to get to. The ones on the audio processor board down there, and then there's, we can even get in here to see them. There's, get a flashlight. Maybe I can get it crammed down in here so you can see them. But if you go, if I can get it to focus in, back in that deep, it's trying to focus on the out. There you go. You can see, just start to see there's a cap right about there. There's a couple in, so there's a couple electrolytics in on this circuit board back in here, and they get changed. So like I say, they made these a little bit challenging to work on, but well worth the effort. You just don't find radios with the build quality and the neatness. I mean, look how, you know, the wiring's very neatly bundled. You know, there are a few wires here that aren't bundled, but that's because they're making runs, you know, shorter runs around on top of the board here. But just very well laid out. And this was, you know, a compact radio. I mean, you think about size-wise, you know, compared to most of your base station radios, they'd be, you know, a lot wider, and especially with the amount of circuitry in here. If you look at the, you know, compare this in size to the Midland, this was a very compact radio. All the features it has. I guess we can go over a few of the controls here. The controls are pretty much all standard on this. You know, your function switch, channel, it has a lot of multi-controls. You know, volume has squelch tone, so you have these little rear guys that spin around. You have your mic power, RF gain, and you have SWR calibrate and a dimmer, so you can dim. Now that only dims the LEDs. Now that is one thing that the customer wanted to change, was change the meter lights over to LEDs, and then what I'll do is I'll have the meter LEDs, well, also, because currently the way these are wired, only the clock and channel display are on the dimmer. The light bulbs are just at continuous brightness. So what I'm going to do is I'll hook once I get these switched over to LED, they will also be attached to the dimmer circuit, so the meter lights will dim accordingly with the channel displays. But you know, has your modulation SWR calibrate switch, and that's another thing that's not unique. There's several other radios that have it, but not a lot. You have choice of 2 antenna connectors, an A and B. So, you know, you can have one hooked up to a vertical, one to a horizontal, one to a, you know, stick antenna, whatever. Like I say, this has a speech compressor built in. That's another reason these talk really well on, especially on sideband. Now this was, I don't want to say unique, but you don't really see this a lot on CB radios, especially this vintage. Some people will tell you this is a dual clarifier. It's not. You see how this rear portion turns while you're turning the front? Okay, so it's not like a coarse and a fine. What this has is a clutch system. So if you watch when I try and spin this rear, see how if I grab that, how fast that spins? But I can also, if I hold the rear, I can turn this front knob. Okay, this is a clutch. It's a little clutch mechanism basically. So when I do the alignment on it, I'll have, you know, that pointer up perfect. But you see how that's offset? If that ever happens to you, if you own one of these radios and your knobs get out of sync, because like I say, it's just a friction clutch. There's nothing to keep that from getting out of line with the rear pointer, which is the actual one that's attached to the actual potentiometer inside the radio. So if you ever get out of line, just put a finger back here, hold this rear one, and then you can spin this front one. you can see there, actually it needs to go went a little bit too far. So hold the rear, spin that back. So yeah, right about there. I usually do this with two hands, but you can get the idea. Like I say, they can get out of whack. So, if that ever happens, that's what you do. Just hold the rear and then spin this front knob until you get the pointers lined up. And then, see, we get spin around there from one side to the other and back up, and you'll see they're still lined up. But if you ever get to the end of adjustment and you keep turning this small knob, that's when you'll knock it out. Because like I say, it'll slip. It's just a clutch. Basically just a small friction clutch is the way that works. So, other than that, clock, power buttons, the alarm, and whatnot. But very nice radios, and I'll continue with this one as I get the repairs done and the alignment on this. So, like I said, I'll probably just tack that onto this video. It might make a separate video. Have to see.